Hi, it's Wyndham. How do you create time and space for new ideas, for alternative philosophies, new concepts? I look back on me when I was younger. For the longest time, I had a really rigidly defined and determined perspective of who I was, and it wasn't very complimentary. I had a really clear, defined and determined view of other people. And you know what? Often that wasn't very complimentary. I had a similarly strongly determined view of the world in general and life as I was experiencing it and could expect to experience it in the future. And because all of those things were so rigidly defined, there was no time and space to consider any alternatives. And the result of that was, well, if I'm not experiencing new ideas, I'm not experiencing growth. And if there is no growth, I'm stuck where I am. Full stop, that's it. And this is essentially where a lot of us end up. We have really rigid views of everything in life. And that rigidity, that certainty sets the pillars that hold up the world for us in a way that makes sense. Now, it just has to make sense. It doesn't have to be positive. It just has to be a story that our brains can go, yeah, that seems about right. So when we come up against, and it does feel like we're coming up against, alternative ideas, alternative philosophies that don't directly and immediately map onto those pillars of certainty that are holding up our world and our identity, our view of ourselves, of others, of life, of the world in general. When we come up against an idea that doesn't instantly map on those, we resist it. I look back and I rejected any idea that didn't fit my blueprint. And I wasn't particularly complimentary about the people who held those opinions, those ideas, those new philosophies for me. So what do you do if we've recognised that no new ideas equals no growth equals stasis where we are? What do we do if we aren't happy? It's a big one. What do we do if we're living a life that we do not feel as fulfilling as we would like it to be? There's a really clear moment in my life where I figured out a new approach. It would have been, 8 or 9 years ago. And I had this, my wife for years and years and years had been suggesting I go and start a yoga practice. So I think you'd really benefit from it. And I resisted it because the defining pillar for me about yoga was it was for petite, beautiful, bendy people who were on some kind of spiritual journey. And that was not me. My brain, I believed, was science, evidence-based. So I rejected it. Not only did I reject it, but I rejected the people who embraced it. I look back on it now and my defense mechanism, because that's what it is, was to almost pity people who, in my view, had drunk the Kool-Aid and bought into this, woo-woo. But that changed for me. And it changed in a very specific way. I look back on my life and for a very long period of time I was deeply unhappy, driven by the fact I hated the job I did. And that had an overbearing impact on the rest of my life that, man, it impacted everything. But the change happened when I asked myself the question, in relation to my approach, my outlook, my beliefs, how is that working out for you? Now, if you ask yourself that question and the answer is perfectly, I'm blissfully happy, my life is full of meaning, it's full of love, it's full of wonderful people, incredible experiences, and a deep sense of peace, bravo. Keep doing what you're doing, because that's what we're all after. If, like me, your response to that question, how is that working out for you, is some version of not well, got a decision to make. Because there's a very famous quote attributed to Einstein that says, we cannot solve the problems we have with the same tools that created them. So some of the challenges we face is the rigidity and certainty of our thought, our determination of the world around us, our determination of ourselves, the pillars that hold up the world in a way that makes sense. So if our approach to that is not working out well, that's the start point. How well is this approach working? Not well. Okay. Second question. What happens if you continue and make no changes? I think we can all guess what the answer to that is going to be. Nothing good is going to. No positive change is coming if I don't make change. So then what do? We have to be open to the fact that these new ideas, these new philosophies, these new concepts can teach us something. And I am not suggesting for a second that we approach all new ideas, all philosophies, all new concepts with the intention of accepting 100% of what they say. That's not what I'm talking about. I had a yoga teacher who was, I think she worked on a completely different level and a different vibration to where I was. She would talk about the crystalline grid. She would talk about fifth dimensional beings. All these things that for me I couldn't get there. I could not find my way to them. And I felt this instant surge of resistance. Because this to me was non-scientific. Come on, show me the evidence. And I had to consciously and constantly remind myself that the approach that was offering me the resistance was not serving me well. This approach was not working out for me. So I had a decision to make. I could shut down my receptiveness, or I could approach what this yoga teacher was saying from the perspective, easy for me to say, from the perspective of how do I bridge to this? What is this? She is using language that is not my language. But what can I get from what she is talking about? Can I find a translation into my language that I can work with, that does offer me something different to what I've always thought and always done and always approached things, and doesn't instantly require me to abandon everything that I think makes sense? It's a really difficult challenge at times, but I would implore you to try it. If your answer to the question, how is this working out for you, when you look at your life, is not well. And then the answer to the question, what happens if you don't make any changes, is nothing positive, then you have to find your way to creating space for new ideas. And when the resistance rises, and it will, I guarantee, what can you do? What can your conscious, logical, reasoning mind come in and say, well, hold on. If we dismiss this whole philosophy wholesale, what does that say about us? Because the big realization for me was the level of arrogance I was carrying that said there is nothing I can learn from these people. I have everything I need and that's just how life is going to be. I got to a place where I was really uncomfortable with that. So how can you build the bridge? What can you take? What would happen if 10% of what they are talking about was true? Use these options, these ideas, these new philosophies and other people's belief systems. Use them to populate a thought experiment. What would this mean if, for me? How might my life change if I adopted some of what they say? How much of what I currently believe is holding me back? What would happen if I let that go? I leave you with that. I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon.